Ladies and gentlemen, I invite you to pause for a moment and ask yourself, what is it that you truly know? Not what you've been told, not what you assume, but what you know deep in your core. Let's begin with control. Life is a dance, a rhythm unfolding. Yet we spend so much energy trying to choreograph it, imagining we're in charge. But are we? Look at how waves crash on the shore, effortless, unplanned, and yet perfect. Perhaps life, too, thrives when we stop forcing it. Control is an idea deeply ingrained in the human psyche. It is comforting, empowering, and seemingly logical to believe that we are the masters of our lives. From the simplest routines to the most ambitious goals, we act as if our choices, plans, and willpower determine the outcomes of our existence. This belief in control creates a framework within which we feel safe, as though life is a predictable system that responds to our inputs. However, the more we examine this belief, the more its foundation begins to crumble. Consider the weather. No amount of preparation, planning, or technology can grant us dominion over a storm. We might predict it, take precautions, or mitigate its effects, but the storm itself unfolds as it will, indifferent to human desires. In our own lives, much the same occurs. A person may strive to build a career or achieve a specific goal, only to be derailed by unforeseen circumstances and illness, an economic downturn, or even a random encounter. In these moments, the illusion of control becomes glaringly apparent. Despite our best efforts, outcomes remain uncertain. Control also implies a separation between ourselves and the world, as though we stand apart, exerting influence upon an external reality. Yet this notion contradicts the interconnected nature of existence. The decisions we make are often shaped by external factors, upbringing, societal norms, subconscious biases, and chance events. Even our preferences, what we love or despise, the choices we deem rational, are often products of influences beyond our awareness. If our desires and actions arise from such conditions, can we truly claim control over them? This illusion manifests powerfully in our relationships. We might believe we can guide, change, or fix those we care about. Yet, anyone who has tried to alter another person's behavior knows how resistant such attempts can be. Others exist as independent centers of experience with their own desires, fears, and paths to follow. Attempting to impose our will on them often leads to frustration, conflict, or harm. The same applies to our environment, nature, societies, even the flow of history. Though we strive to shape these according to our visions, the forces at play are vast and complex, defying full comprehension or control. Our clinging to control also creates significant stress and anxiety. When life deviates from our expectations, we experience frustration, guilt, or despair, as if we have failed in our duties as its architects. A rigid belief in control fosters a sense of personal responsibility for every outcome, ignoring the role of chance and circumstance. The unpredictability of life becomes a source of fear, not because uncertainty is inherently threatening, but because it challenges our illusion of being in charge. The illusion of control limits our ability to adapt. When we view ourselves as the sole drivers of our destiny, we resist the flow of life, clinging to plans and expectations even when they no longer serve us. This rigidity blinds us to opportunities that arise spontaneously and to paths that might lead us somewhere unexpected but meaningful. The illusion of control is not only an intellectual construct but also an emotional attachment. It offers a sense of power and reassurance, making it difficult to let go. Yet, as we engage with the unpredictability and interconnectedness of existence, this illusion reveals itself as both a limitation and an opportunity for deeper understanding. Reality, at first glance, appears self-evident. We wake up, see the sun rising, and assume that what we experience is an unfiltered interaction with the world. Objects seem solid, time flows in one direction, and events unfold according to cause and effect. But this apparent simplicity conceals a deeper complexity. Reality as we perceive it is not a straightforward reflection of the external world, but is shaped by our senses, thoughts, and assumptions. Our perception begins with our senses, which act as intermediaries between us and the world. Light enters the eyes, sound waves vibrate the eardrums, and tactile sensations travel through nerve endings. Yet, these signals are not reality itself, they are interpretations. For instance, color is not an inherent property of objects, but a result of how our brains process light wavelengths. A red apple is not inherently red, its redness. It exists only in the interplay between the apple, light, and our visual system. Similarly, sounds are not qualities of the air, but patterns of vibration interpreted by the brain. Beyond sensory input lies the mind's tendency to organize and impose meaning. We group objects, label experiences, and draw connections. A tree is not just a collection of leaves, branches, and bark. It becomes a symbol of life, growth, or even nostalgia, depending on our associations. This mental framework is useful for navigation and survival, yet it also limits us. We filter out what we deem irrelevant, creating a version of reality that aligns with our needs and expectations. This selective attention raises the question, how much of reality do we miss? Cultural and linguistic influences further shape our experience of the world. Language provides a shared structure for communicating ideas, yet it also imposes boundaries. Words simplify complex phenomena into discrete categories, leading us to perceive distinctions that may not exist in the same way outside our constructs. In some languages, there are no distinct words for blue and green, blending these colors into a continuum. Does this linguistic difference mean their speakers see colors differently? If so, how much of what we consider real is shaped by our culture rather than the external world? Time offers another dimension where reality diverges from intuition. We experience time as linear with a clear past, present, and future. Yet, physics suggests that time is more fluid, possibly existing all at once or bending under certain conditions. Even within human experience, time is malleable. A moment of joy may feel fleeting, while a few minutes of discomfort can stretch endlessly. Our sense of time is not dictated by a universal clock, but by our subjective engagement with it. The concept of reality is further complicated by quantum mechanics, where particles exist in a state of probability until observed, suggesting that observation itself influences reality. This idea challenges the notion of an independent, objective world. If reality depends on interaction, then its existence without observers is uncertain, pushing the boundaries of what we can confidently claim to know. All these layers, sensory, cultural, linguistic, and scientific, suggest that reality is far less stable and objective than it appears. Instead, it is a dynamic interplay between the external world and the internal processes that interpret it. This interplay creates a version of reality unique to each individual, while simultaneously questioning whether there is a singular, ultimate reality at all. Interconnection is the thread that binds the fabric of existence, a principle so fundamental yet often overlooked in our daily lives. The universe operates not as a collection of isolated entities, but as a vast, intricate web where each part influences and depends on the others. This concept is not just philosophical, but observable in science, nature, and human society. In nature, the interconnection between species and ecosystems provides a vivid illustration. Consider a forest. Trees, plants, animals, fungi, and microorganisms coexist in a delicate balance. The trees provide oxygen and shelter while drawing nutrients from the soil enriched by decomposed organic matter contributed by fungi and microorganisms. Pollinators like bees and butterflies play a crucial role in the reproduction of plants, while predators regulate populations to prevent overgrazing. Even the seemingly insignificant actions of an insect or the movement of water through soil can ripple through the system, affecting the whole. The concept of interconnection extends into the realm of the physical sciences. Quantum physics suggests that particles separated by vast distances can remain entangled, their states inexplicably linked. This phenomenon, known as quantum entanglement, challenges our traditional understanding of separateness. On a broader scale, The cosmic forces that shake the universe, gravity, electromagnetism, and the fusion within stars are the same forces responsible for the elements in our bodies. The iron in your blood and the calcium in your bones were forged in the hearts of stars billions of years ago, reminding us that we are quite literally made of stardust. In human society, the interconnected nature of our actions and decisions becomes strikingly apparent. The global economy functions as an intricate network where events in one part of the world can trigger ripple effects across continents. A drought in one region may lead to food shortages and price increases elsewhere, affecting millions. Similarly, the Internet has amplified our awareness of interconnection, creating an instantaneous flow of information that transcends physical boundaries. Our collective decisions on issues like climate change, public health, and technology illustrate how deeply intertwined our fates are. Interconnection also manifests on an emotional and psychological level. Human relationships form a web of influence where each interaction shapes and is shaped by the others. Acts of kindness or cruelty can cascade, creating ripples that spread far beyond their initial point. This idea is mirrored in psychological studies showing how emotions like happiness or anxiety can spread through social groups, influencing even those at the periphery. The connections we share, seen and unseen, become the scaffolding of our individual and collective experience. On a more subtle level, interconnection challenges the way we view the self. The boundaries we draw between ourselves and others, or between us and the environment, are not as fixed as they appear. Biologically, we are ecosystems unto ourselves, hosting trillions of microbes essential for digestion, immunity, and health. Psychologically, our thoughts and identities are shaped by cultural, familial, and societal influences. Even our sense of individuality is deeply entwined with the collective. The principle of interconnection suggests that nothing exists in isolation. The air we breathe has been exhaled by countless living beings before us. The water we drink has traveled through clouds, rivers, and oceans, touching the lives of innumerable creatures. Every action, no matter how small, contributes to a vast, dynamic system, shaping and being shaped by it in return. This perspective reveals the profound truth that we are not merely in the world, we are of it, inseparable from its flow and rhythm. The concept of the self is both fascinating and elusive, a cornerstone of human experience that has been examined by philosophers, scientists, and spiritual traditions for centuries. At its core, the self feels tangible, a fixed center of awareness that defines who we are. Yet upon closer inspection, this seemingly solid I begins to dissolve into a dynamic interplay of experiences, perceptions, and influences. In everyday life, the self is often equated with identity, our name, personality, history, and preferences. These characteristics create a narrative that gives us continuity and distinguishes us from others. Yet, when examined, these traits are not as permanent as they appear. A person's personality evolves over time, shaped by life experiences, relationships, and even biological changes. The self we knew as a child bears little resemblance to the self we identify with as an adult, prompting the question, if the self changes so fundamentally, what remains constant? From a neurological perspective, the self is not localized to a single part of the brain, but emerges from a network of processes. Research suggests that the sense of self arises from the brain's ability to integrate sensory inputs, memories, and emotional states into a cohesive experience. The default mode network DMN, active when the brain is at rest, is thought to play a significant role in this integration. Yet, even this neuroscientific understanding points to the self as a construct rather than a fixed entity. Cognitive science also reveals how the self is shaped by perception. What we perceive as a unified, stable self is the result of the brain's continuous processing and interpretation of sensory data. Experiments involving body illusions, such as the rubber hand illusion, show how malleable our sense of self can be. By synchronizing visual and tactile stimuli, people can be made to feel ownership of an artificial hand, illustrating how easily the brain constructs a sense of self in response to environmental cues. Philosophical and spiritual traditions often challenge the conventional understanding of the self. In Buddhist philosophy, the self is viewed as a collection of aggregates forms, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness that are constantly changing. This perspective, known as anatta, or not self, suggests that clinging to a fixed self is the root of suffering. Similarly, the Hindu concept of Atman distinguishes between the individual ego and the universal self, implying that what we consider I is a limited expression of something far greater. The self is also deeply relational. Who we are is influenced by the people around us, the cultures we belong to, and the roles we inhabit. Language, for instance, shapes how we think about the self, with some cultures emphasizing individuality, while others prioritize interconnectedness. Even our emotions are relational, often defined by interactions with others: pride in relation to achievement, love in relation to connection, or guilt in relation to harm caused. The boundary between self and other is more porous than it appears. Biologically, we are ecosystems hosting trillions of microorganisms essential for our survival. Psychologically, our thoughts are influenced by external stimuli, from the media we consume to the conversations we engage in. The self exists not in isolation, but in constant interaction with the world. As we delve deeper into the nature of the self, it becomes clear that it is not a static entity, but a fluid and evolving process. The self is both shaped by and shaping the world around it, a paradoxical interplay that challenges the very notion of separateness. Time, as we perceive it, feels linear and absolute, stretching from the past through the present and into the future. We measure it in seconds, minutes, hours, and years, organizing our lives around its passage. Yet closer examination reveals that time may not be an objective feature of reality, but rather a mental construct, a framework through which humans interpret change and sequence events. Physicists have long challenged the common understanding of time. Albert Einstein's theory of relativity redefined time as part of a four-dimensional fabric known as space-time, where time is not separate from space but intertwined with it. In this framework, time is relative, depending on factors such as gravity and motion. A clock closer to a massive object will tick more slowly than one farther away, a phenomenon known as time dilation. This insight disrupts the notion of a universal now and suggests that what we call time is more about perspective than an inherent property of the universe. Beyond physics, our psychological experience of time further reveals its subjective nature. Studies have shown that time perception varies depending on context, emotion, and attention. In moments of heightened focus or danger, time may feel slower, as if stretched, while during periods of monotony or distraction, it can seem to fly by. A single day may feel interminable, yet a decade can pass in the blink of an eye. This elasticity of time perception underscores its dependence on the mind, not on external reality. Memory plays a crucial role in constructing our sense of time. The past exists for us only as a collection of memories, images, feelings, and narratives stored in the brain. Without memory, there would be no past, only an eternal present. Similarly, the future is a projection of possibilities built from imagination and anticipation. We envision outcomes, plan actions, and worry about uncertainties, but these are mental activities occurring in the present. Thus, both past and future are constructs that exist only in relation to our current awareness. Cultural and linguistic frameworks also shape how we understand time. Some languages describe time as moving forward, while others conceptualize it as stationary, with the individual moving through it. In cultures with cyclical views of time, such as those influenced by certain indigenous or Eastern traditions, time is perceived as a recurring loop, rather than a straight line. These differing interpretations demonstrate that our perception of time is deeply influenced by the cultural lenses through which we view the world. The linear model of time is further complicated by the present moment, which we perceive as the only point of actual experience. Yet the present is fleeting, impossible to hold. By the time we recognize it, it has already passed. This paradox raises profound questions about what time truly is. If the past is memory and the future is imagination, and the present is intangible, Does time exist independently of our minds, or is it a structure we impose to make sense of existence? Even biological rhythms, such as circadian cycles, reinforce the mental nature of time. These natural clocks regulate bodily functions in alignment with environmental changes, such as light and dark. However, they do not measure time in a fixed sense. Rather, they adapt to changing conditions, further highlighting the fluidity of time as we experience it. In this way, time emerges not as an objective reality, but as a lens through which we interpret change. It allows us to order events, make sense of causality, and navigate existence, but its true nature eludes definitive understanding. Duality is an inherent feature of human experience, a concept deeply woven into the fabric of our perception of reality. It appears everywhere, from philosophy to religion, and from nature to human behavior. We constantly encounter opposites, light and dark, good and evil, life and death, success and failure. These contrasts shape how we understand the world, yet they are not separate, independent entities. They are interdependent, existing only in relation to one another. Duality reflects the mind's tendency to categorize and differentiate. For example, light cannot exist without darkness, nor can good exist without bad. These opposites do not stand in isolation, but are defined by their opposition. Without darkness, we would have no concept of light. Without failure, success would be devoid of meaning. The very notion of good implies the existence of evil, and life is inextricably tied to the awareness of death. It is the contrast that gives each its definition, its significance. This interdependence challenges the simplistic notion that one side of a duality is superior to the other. In many ways, dualities are complementary. Light depends on dark, just as joy is often understood through the lens of suffering. Life in its richness would be shallow without the awareness of death's inevitable approach. Our experiences of happiness are often heightened by the knowledge that moments of sorrow or loss are an inseparable part of our journey. The dance between opposites creates a balance that is necessary for the full experience of life. Philosophical traditions have long explored this idea. In Taoism, for example, the concept of yin and yang emphasizes the harmony of opposites. Each force contains the seed of its opposite, and both are necessary for the proper functioning of the universe. The Taoist symbol of the Taijitu illustrates this balance. Within the white circle of yang is a small dot of yin, and within the black circle of yin is a dot of yang. This represents the idea that no aspect of existence is purely one thing, but is always interconnected with its opposite. In Western philosophy, dualism often appears in the form of mind and body. René Descartes' famous assertion, cogito, ergo sum, I think, therefore I am, represents the idea that the mind and body are separate substances. This duality creates a divide between our mental and physical experiences, leading to centuries of philosophical inquiry about the relationship between consciousness and matter. While modern science has tended to lean toward more integrated models of mind and body, the dualistic view still influences how we understand our own consciousness and its relationship to the physical world. In the realm of human behavior, duality manifests in our own internal conflicts. We constantly wrestle with opposing desires, goals, and values. One moment we may yearn for connection, while in another we seek solitude. We experience moments of kindness and cruelty, wisdom and ignorance, fear and courage. These dualities within the self reflect the complexity of the human condition, where our identities are not fixed but are constantly in flux, shaped by a multitude of opposing forces. Duality appears in the spiritual domain. Many religious traditions emphasize the struggle between good and evil, or the dichotomy between the material and spiritual realms. In Christianity, the battle between light and darkness is central to the narrative of salvation, while in Buddhism, the concept of suffering and liberation embodies the tension between samsara, the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, and nirvana, the cessation of suffering. In nature, dualities abound. Day and night, the seasons, birth and decay, all exemplify cycles of change driven by contrasting forces. The seasons themselves demonstrate the ebb and flow of opposites. The warmth of summer gives way to the cold of winter. only for the cycle to begin again. The process of growth, with its inevitable decay, mirrors the cycles of the universe, where life and death are not opposites but two sides of the same coin. What we perceive as duality often provides the structure within which we make sense of the world. These opposites are not in conflict with one another, but rather they work together, creating a dynamic tension that drives change and evolution. In recognizing the interdependence of these contrasts, we come to appreciate the complexity and depth of existence, understanding that neither side can exist without the other. Letting go is one of the most profound and liberating acts we can experience, yet it is also one of the most difficult. At its core, letting go involves releasing control, expectations, attachments, and even identities that have become deeply embedded in our sense of self. It is not simply an act of surrender, but a conscious decision to accept impermanence, uncertainty, and the flow of life. For many, letting go can feel like a form of loss, but it also opens up the potential for growth, renewal, and freedom. One of the most obvious areas in which letting go is crucial is in the realm of relationships. Whether with family, friends, or romantic partners, relationships are often fraught with expectations and attachments that can weigh heavily on us. When a relationship ends or when people change, the natural instinct is often to hold on to what was, trying to preserve the past in some form. Yet this attachment can prevent growth, both personal and relational. Letting go in this context involves accepting that people evolve, that circumstances shift, and that our connections with others may no longer serve us in the way they once did. At the same time, letting go in relationships can be an act of compassion, both for ourselves and for others. Holding on to resentment, bitterness, or anger creates unnecessary suffering, keeping us tethered to past events that no longer define us. Letting go of these negative emotions frees us to experience life more fully, without the weight of unresolved conflicts.